I'll bruise up George Foreman. If I don't knock him out, I'll cut him up. All around his face will be Nixon.
Muhammad Ali was more than just a boxer. He was a force in the ring, a cultural icon, a political figure, and for many, a symbol of pride. But greatness often casts a long shadow, and in Ali's case, that shadow stretched across the boxing world, leaving bruised egos, resentments, rivalries steeped in bitterness.
That I was the greatest of all times when I beat Sonny Liston. I told you today, I'm still the greatest of all.
For every fan who loved his swagger, his poetry, his lightning feet and fists, there were fighters who loathed the man behind the legend. They felt he disrespected them, belittled their name, or simply took something from their life. Some of them fought him, many even lost to him. But the resentment lingered long after the bell rang. Below are 10 boxers who, by their words or documented behavior, carried a genuine animosity toward Muhammad Ali. Each story reveals a different reason: insult, betrayal, humiliation, identity, or injustice. 1. Joe Frazier. Arguably the most famous and deeply emotional rivalry in boxing history, Joe Frazier's hatred of Ali ran long and intense. Frazier once said, "I hated Ali. God might not like me talking that way, but it's in my heart." Frazier and Ali were opposites in style and persona. Ali's brash, electric display contrasted with Frazier's relentless, grinding approach. But the animosity went far beyond fighting styles. Ali's verbal attacks prior to their first fight, the insults, the racial jabs, the trash talk, wounded Frazier deeply. By the time of their iconic trilogy, 1967, 1974, 1975, some wounds had healed publicly. But privately, Frazier's bitterness remained. The fact that Ali had thrown headline-grabbing words like calling Frazier a gorilla or too ugly to be champion left scars. Frazier felt his loyalty and support had been betrayed. He had backed Ali when Ali was stripped of his title for refusing the draft, yet felt Ali turned on him with insults and mockery. The first fight, Frazier won, but the animosity endured long after. Frazier never fully forgave the insults, and even when reconciled, he admitted the hatred lasted until the end. For Frazier, Ali was more than an opponent. He was someone who undermined his dignity, and that is a wound that time rarely heals. 2. Ernie Terrell. Another bout rooted deeply in identity and disrespect. Terrell labeled Ali by his former name Cassius Clay, refusing to honor his conversion to Islam and his name change. Ali took this personally. Terrell later described their fight as the worst beating of my life. In their February 1967 fight at the Astrodome in Houston, Ali repeatedly taunted Terrell with, "What's my name?" and pummeled him relentlessly. Many historians describe it as less a boxing match than a public humiliation. Terrell later said he believed Ali's fury was premeditated. He remarked that Ali told him, "You will call me by my name," during the meet and greet. Terrell felt the buildup had been intentionally provocative, but once in the ring, he paid the price. For Terrell, the resentment came from a deep personal insult, refusing to accept Ali's identity change, and Ali making that the centerpiece of their match. The humiliation of being constantly asked, "What's my name?" while being beaten left a long shadow. 3. Floyd Patterson shares similarities with Terrell. He also refused to call Ali by his adopted name for some time, viewing Ali's Muslim conversion and name change as gimmickry. Patterson believed Ali's public persona eroded what boxing should stand for: class, respect, and humility. He went beyond stylistic differences and saw Ali's showmanship as disrespect to the sport. Though he lost to Ali in 1965 and their dynamic never reached the lore of Frazier's, Patterson's resentment was rooted in identity, religion, and perceived insult. The combination of being publicly demeaned and overshadowed by Ali created a bitterness that time didn't fully erase. 4. Sonny Liston. Sonny Liston's dislike of Ali is less explicitly documented in quotes, but the humiliation he suffered at Ali's hands is well noted. After Ali, then Cassius Clay, defeated Liston in 1964 and again in 1965 in the Phantom Punch rematch, Liston's aura of invincibility shattered. Ali's verbal warfare in the lead-up, mocking Liston's criminal record, calling him a big ugly bear, contributed to Liston's resentment. The humiliation of that defeat, combined with the stripping of Liston's dominant status, left a bitter mark. Even if Liston didn't publicly declare hate, the animosity was implicit. Ali's personality overshadowed Liston's legacy for many fans, and Liston never recovered the same level of respect during his career. 5. Ken Norton. Ken Norton famously broke Ali's jaw in their first fight in 1973 and won by split decision. He believed he had beaten Ali in subsequent rematches and carried a lingering frustration. Though Norton and Ali never had the same personal hatred dynamic as Frazier or Terrell, Norton's resentment stemmed from the feeling of being denied full recognition. Norton once said Ali got lucky in their later fights. He held that Ali's showmanship allowed him to evade full accountability. That sense of injustice drove a quiet animosity. Norton's bitterness was less about insults and more about being overshadowed. He did something rare. He beat Ali, yet the memory of that didn't receive the same glow. That disparity, for many fighters, translates into resentment. 6. George Foreman. George Foreman's dynamic with Ali is complex. On the one hand, after Ali's Rumble in the Jungle victory in 1974 over Foreman, Foreman's dislike of Ali stemmed from being humbled publicly. Foreman's aura of invincibility was broken by Ali's strategic brilliance and flamboyant persona. Foreman publicly praised Ali later, but at the time, the loss was devastating. He felt the media and public more readily embraced Ali's swagger, while Foreman's power was seen as brute. In interviews, Foreman has indicated resentment at not being the hero of that era. While Foreman might not have declared open hatred, the resentment of how I lost and how the world remembers it places Foreman in this list of fighters who had bitterness toward Ali's dominance and style. 7. Larry Holmes. Larry Holmes actually succeeded Ali as heavyweight champion, and they fought in 1980 when Ali was well past his peak. However, Holmes has admitted frustration at the buildup of that fight and what it meant for him. Some of that frustration stems from being forced to fight his idol, being framed as the young lion and Ali as the old legend. Reddit commentary suggests Holmes was emotionally conflicted about defeating his hero. Holmes's resentment comes from being in Ali's shadow for years, training in Ali's era, watching Ali's showmanship, and yet being boxed into the role of successor rather than equal. He resented the public narrative that still centered on Ali, even when Holmes held the title. That sense of being overshadowed is a common source of animosity among fighters. 8. Jerry Quarry. Jerry Quarry's feelings toward Ali are less publicly documented in raw quotes, but among boxing forums and historical discussion, Quarry is noted to have spoken of Ali as arrogant and divisive. In a Reddit thread, Quarry said of Ali, "I respect him as a fighter, but I don't like him one bit." Quarry's resentment emerges from being part of an era in which Ali's personality dominated the heavyweight scene, changing boxing's presentation, promotion, and value system. Quarry felt Ali's style, the crown, the poetry, the politics, shifted boxing in ways that disadvantaged those who didn't conform. That cultural shift bred bitterness. 9. Joe Bugner. Joe Bugner fought Ali twice, 1973 and 1975, and despite carrying some respect, one article suggests he carried resentment about how the fights were promoted, how Ali insulted and demeaned him during press events, and how the general public and media elevated Ali's persona. Bugner said Ali called him ugly, told him, "Your mother must have cried when she had you," comments which Bugner didn't forget. Bugner's bitterness is rooted in the clash of persona. Here is a hard-working boxer who felt he was subsumed in Ali's show. The difference in how Ali was covered, how media, both press and fans, lauded Ali's bravado, left Bugner with a sense of injustice. The resentment of being part of the show rather than the star is real. 10. Ernesto Duran. While not all sources document Duran hating Ali in the same sense as others, the spirit of resentment toward Ali by a number of boxers from his era fighters who felt sidelined or insulted by Ali's ego, allows us to include a representative figure. These fighters often felt Ali's promotion, politics, and persona overshadowed their own achievements. For many boxers of that generation, Ali's braggadocio, his cultural status, his self-promotion were off-putting. They practiced the craft quietly, trained hard. But Ali's swagger changed boxing's rules. Some felt the sport became more about personality than pure fighting. That broader resentment can be seen in multiple interviews and fan forums. While Duran publicly praised Ali, the underlying bitterness of many in his era toward Ali's dominance applies. Including such a figure allows us to honor the many unnamed fighters who quietly resented Ali's ascendancy and cultural takeover, a kind of collective resentment category.